This is U.S. Army Closer Look.
I think the job is pretty awesome.
Innovating.
Insight.
Soldiers.
Mission.
Closer Look.
Closer look.
Those who were there.
And what we need to make sure is we have the most capable Army to deliver specific effects on a battlefield relative to U.S. national security interests.
Those experiences, those strategies.
Closer look.
Closer look.
Army Media. James C. McCloughan, Vietnam veteran, Medal of Honor recipient for his courageous actions as a combat medic during the Vietnam War, describes the battle.
Well, first of all, on the early morning of May the 12th, our company was on LZ Center guarding it. At the north end, sappers came up there and they wounded 24 and killed 4 people. Literally obliterated a bunker down there, and that's where the artillery unit was down there at that end. And so I rushed down there in the early morning of the 12th, May the 12th, and I just recently have been recontacted by 2 of the guys that I saved on May the 12th down there. One went through 51 operations after I sent him off in helicopter, but he told me what I had done that evening, early morning I should say, was saved his life. That's kind of good to hear. So morning light comes and I get a little sleep because I've been up most of the night patching up people down at the other end, and I find out in the evening that we're going to go in, be combat assaulted into Tam Key and be a blocking force for Nguyen Hill for a track unit that's going to come over the top and flush out some NVA and VC. Well, Lieutenant Carrier, who later became Captain Carrier, and this was his second tour in Vietnam. He had been over there once before. He was 17 when he came over the first time, lied about his age. Turned 21 the day after he got his captain bars. He had been called into a session with the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel John Brandenburg, and he was told that he was going to take Company C into Tam Key and do this mission that I just described, be a blocking force. He said, I think this is a flawed mission. Brandenburg says, well, what do you mean? He says, well, you haven't sent any forward observers in there, have you? No. He says, well then, you don't know how many are in there, and my company's down to 89 men. We had lost some men, and some men had de-roast, and we hadn't gotten pumped back up to the right number, and the right number is around 130, 135. In World War II, by the way, the company was about 180. And, but if you could keep 135, 140 in Vietnam, you were lucky. So he says, well, you're gonna take them in or we're gonna court-martial you. Well, he knew if he didn't take us in, he'd get court-martialed and they'd send somebody else with us to take us in. So I'm glad he made the decision to stay with us and take us in anyway, even though he knew this was not good. So in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, helicopters come to pick us up. We've tried to figure it out. There must have been 13, 14 helicopters with 7 on 1, and that's too many. It was 7 on several, I should say, and then 6 on all of the others. We kind of did the mathematical thing and figured that's what it was, about 13 or 14 choppers. Combat assaulted us into the area near the base of Nguyen Hill. Well, it was a hot LZ, which means that the minute that we got there, we were fired upon, which also means when you come into a hot LZ that those helicopters are not going to land and have you jump off. They're going to tell you to jump off from a pretty high up height. And I'm estimating that it was between 10 and 8 feet. And when you jump out with a full pack, 10 to 8 feet, what we had was a few injured people, which I'll kind of talk about later on. So we jump out, and we're being shot at, of course, 'cause they shot down one helicopter, and they brought in I don't know if it was one of the helicopters that led some of the guys off that went down and picked that crew up, but another one was shot down, and they couldn't get to them, so we sent a squad out to protect them in this big culvert. It was a place that had been bombed out, and they kind of got in there, and the squad surrounded and protected them while they tried to get a helicopter in to take them out. Well, they couldn't get anybody in. They were being fired upon so heavily that nobody could land and get them out. So they ordered them, and I'm estimating they were out there about 200 meters. They ordered the squad to bring the crew in, and that will bring in helicopters up here and get them out from up here. So they started coming in, and I could see at quite a distance behind them, and I'm going to estimate 100 to 75 yards, there was a North Vietnamese unit on line coming at them, trying to pick them off. Well, I also noticed there was one guy lagging behind. I would later learn that his name is Bill Arnold. And he's lagging behind, and he's actually even using his M16 for a crutch. When the squad and they also have the crew with them, when they get in behind the perimeter, and we're trying to protect them as best we can, shooting at the enemy, I realized this guy's still out there 75 yards, and he falls down. I mean, he goes down. And I just reacted the way Jim McCloughan reacts, and I'm the medic. I jumped up, I weaved and sprinted through the fire and slid in next to him like I was sliding into second base. And I said, "Are you hit anywhere?" "No," he said, "I'm not hit anywhere." He said, "But I hurt my knee jumping on a helicopter. We've been out there most of the afternoon in that heat, and my knee is just swollen, and I can't hardly even walk on it." And I said, "Well, you hang on to your M16 because you're going up on my shoulders." So I threw him up fireman style and weaved my way through the crossfire, and they're doing a good job of missing us at this end, but they're trying to hit us. The NVA and that are trying to hit us from the back end. And I got him in, and I dusted him off. And he never saw the battle. So his knee being injured jumping out of the helicopter became a blessing in disguise for him, although he didn't realize it at the time. And Jim McCloughan going out and dragging him in, he would have either been captured or killed, because they had gotten close enough to do that. He wasn't going to move from that spot. So the day goes by, and I have a few heat casualties. That North Vietnamese unit, they left, of course. They're not going to attack a whole company. They'd done their job. And I'm going around getting some of the guys that were injured taped up and that kind of thing. And we actually could get helicopters in and get them out. I had something to eat and drink just before we combat assaulted off of the hill at LZ Center that morning, and I still haven't had anything to eat or drink all day, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon rolls around. I hear we're gonna go out. We've been ordered, Clark has been told by Lieutenant Carrier that we're supposed to send a squad or a platoon out and check out the area. And I'm thinking, are these people nuts? We came into a hot LZ. We know there's enough out there that, we could get hurt sending a platoon out there. They had 2 helicopters shot down, and they couldn't even get another helicopter in there to rescue some of the crew. Nope, they meant it. Well, here we had a problem. The guy that would usually carry the radio was dusted off with a heat exhaustion. Big man. He was helicoptered into the 312th in the afternoon with heat exhaustion. So now the guy that was gonna walk point has to carry the radio And the guy that's going to walk point hasn't even been there a month. Well, you can't put him on the radio because he hadn't been there a month, and that radio is pretty important for communication, so that's what they had to do. Lieutenant Clark, our platoon leader, wasn't happy about that, but not much he could do about it. So we're strung out going across this rice paddy. We're not in contact with anybody yet. We're trying to feel our way across. We get into a trench line that I'm sure was dug by the French many years ago. And we're going along, and it's kind of brushy area, so you're not sticking up like a sore thumb, but you're still not very well protected, and you can't hide too well. And by this time, we don't know it, but they know we're coming, and they see us coming. And they've already set up an ambush for us. I get in the trench line, and I'm behind the first squad, but usually I'm in the middle of the whole platoon, but I placed myself behind the first squad because I figure if anything happens, I want to be close enough that I don't have to come from the middle of the pack. By the time that the front of this platoon, or the lead squad, had made a right turn in this trench line and round, we're coming just into the trench line by a huge berm type of thing. And I look up, and there's two NVAs quite a distance from me, I'll say over 100 yards from me, stringing out barbed wire. So they're setting up some things there too at the base of the hill. Only the base of the hill is quite a ways away yet. And I see these little people coming down off the hill, bunches of them. And so I pointed at those two and got Hatton and Mittendorf's attention. I pointed at the guy on the left, and I pointed at myself, meaning I was going to get him and somebody else get him. So when I plugged him and they started firing, they got the other guy, all hell broke out up front. The front squad is now hit with the ambush. So we get into the trench line and get close to the right angle where they had gone around and hit the ambush. There was 3 trees growing together. And I said to Sergeant Hatton, I said, I'm gonna go over there by those trees and I'm gonna pick some of those people off that are in that ambush. No, Doc, you don't go over there, he said to me. And I said, come on, Hatton, you know, I'm becoming quite a fighting man. I know what I'm doing. I think if I get over there by that tree, that we'll be able to see some people and I can pick them off. Don't go over there. I mean, just like I just said it, don't go over there. Less than 15 seconds later, now we have no grenades for smoke to throw out. We're amongst the enemy, but the people coming overhead don't know that. They don't know where we're at. They don't know we're right there in the same vicinity. So I hear this sound of the helicopter coming in, and I look up, and a Cobra is, I'm not kidding you, he is just overhead, and he takes and he spins and he points that nose down and he fired, and that tree went into toothpicks. And I looked at Sergeant Hatton, and he looked at me just like, I told you so, don't go over there. You know, now I'm realizing, a split-second realization that, no, Jim, you're not Sergeant Hatton yet. Listen to what he has to say. So I hear some commotion, and I kind of look up out of the trench line. If you stood up high enough, you could look up out of the trench line. I looked up on top of the berm, and over by some bushes were 2 guys laying there, which I would learn later was a guy by the name of John Folger and a guy by the name of Larry Aiken. And I get over to them, and just as I get to them, I hear this ungodly explosion. Well, it was an RPG that exploded nearby me and just pelted me from head to foot. I felt it. I mean, I felt the sting of it, but with the adrenaline flowing, knowing that here's two guys, let's get going here. We got to take care of them. What are you going to do now? I got down next to them and I said, you guys hit. Oh, we're not hit. But you could tell they were scared. They had no weapons. They'd left their weapons out there where the ambush had hit. And I don't know how they got away from that ambush and up in this area, but they did. Now, Aiken's about 215 pounds and Folger's about 185 pounds, and I drugged the two of them across the top of that berm and into that trench line. I had handed my weapon to Hatton before I jumped on there, and I looked around, and Hatton and Mittendorf were gone. Well, what I didn't realize was that ambush is starting to come in from around that right angle, and they're starting to come around and see who is this in the trench line. But I looked up on the berm, and about 10 meters away, it's two NBA looking at me just like I'm looking at you. Only they got AK-47s in their hands, and I had given my weapon up, and Folger and Aiken, they don't have any weapons either. And I said, gentlemen, follow me. And I turned and I sprinted down that trench line, and then I realized this is slowing me up, so I got out into the open because I could run faster. And I'm weaving and then literally could hear and see the bullets skipping off the ground. They're firing at me.
Listen to part 2 of the battle on Closer Look. Hear what happens to McCloughan and his team that earned him the Medal of Honor. This is U.S. Army Closer Look.
I think the job is pretty awesome.
Innovating. Insight.
Soldiers.
Mission.
Closer Look.
Closer look.
Those who were there.
And what we need to make sure is we have the most capable Army to deliver specific effects on a battlefield relative to U.S. national security interests.
Those experiences, those strategies.
Closer look.
Closer look.
Army Media.